Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Alexis for anybody who doesn't know. Welcome if you're new, or welcome back if you have been here before. I am the author of A Journey into Truth, Unveiling Life's Secrets for Truth Seekers, and in this book I talk all about the last 6 years of my life, the adventures I've been on since being on a spiritual journey, also some of the teachers I've met and some of the life lessons and philosophies I have learned as well from my experiences and those teachers. That book will be available for pre-order on November 2nd, 2021, and it'll be available for purchase on February 2nd, 2022. Here on Vibrate to Create, I talk about all things spiritual and metaphysical. I also talk about my own personal life experiences, the things I've experienced and learned along my life's path and my life's journey. And I also make reaction videos to things like spiritual teachers, spiritual teachings, inspirational, motivational videos, and sometimes I give unsolicited advice. And I also make entrepreneurial videos letting you guys know how to self-publish your own books. If you're interested in that kind of content, you can click the subscribe button or hit the notification bell to be notified of when I post new videos so you never miss a video. If you would like more information about the book or about me, you can go to my website at www.vibratecreate.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Vibrate2Create, where sometimes I show you guys some sneak peeks of what's coming. And if you have any more videos that you would like for me to react to, you can always send those to my email at vibratecreate@gmail.com. What do I want to watch today? This is interesting. It says Psychosis or Spiritual Awakening by Phil Borges at TEDx UMKC. And this was filmed 7 years ago.
Good evening. One of the things I love about visiting indigenous cultures is it lets me step back in time and see how we all lived centuries ago. And first of all, a relationship to the land. In indigenous cultures, there's no grocery store. In tribal cultures especially, no utility districts, no water districts, no fast food restaurants. Nothing stands between them and their survival other than their own ingenuity. The other relationship that I've noticed is so tight is our relationship to each other. And that produces a real tightness. I've noticed women at a well in Africa, for instance. They're all sitting around joking and talking. They're nursing their babies. And the woman that needs to go to get the water will take her baby and pass it to another woman. She'll start nursing it. That woman will see her goat run off and she'll pass the baby to a third woman and she'll start nursing it. So these kids are kind of even raised communally. They live in extended families, and that brings a real tightness. The other relationship that I want to talk about tonight is the relationship to spirit. And it's a very strong one. So this is Malik and her great-granddaughter, Yasmina. And they spend all their time together, 14 hours a day working in the garden. And I've seen this in Africa, Asia, South America, and I ask, why are these two people that are so different together all the time? It's this big age difference. And they said, no, you don't understand. Yasmina is just about coming out of the spirit world, and Malik is just about to go back into the spirit world. So they really do have the most in common.
Oof.
And they literally pray to the spirits of the forests, the mountains, the rivers. They put spirits in everything. Their ancestor spirits are so important to them. So in the beginning, I sort of looked at this as superstition, uneducated, naive thinking. And over the last 30 years, I've slowly changed. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how that change came about. So, and there were about 60 monks in there. They let the medium in, sat him down, put this big hat on his head, and a very heavy hat. His face turned kind of red. The monks started chanting and beating their drums. And he kind of went into this trance. And he started talking in a real high-pitched voice. And the monks started writing down everything he was saying. And then, after about 5 minutes of that, he fainted, and they literally had to carry him out of the room. And I just watched this, and I was wondering, is this a performance? Did he have a heart attack? But 2 days later, I was able to interview the medium. His name is Tukin. He was 30 years old at the time. He's 50 now.
This is a really cool story.
He said that he didn't remember a thing that he said when he was in this trance. And he felt very weak right afterwards, for a day afterwards. And he said, so I said, well, how did you become the medium? And how did you get this job? And he said, you know, when I was younger, I had started hearing these voices. I started feeling very ill, and I was very confused. And in fact, I thought I was dying at one point. And an older monk came to me and said, hey, you've got a gift. And he taught me how to go in and out of trance. He nurtured me. He stayed with me for the whole year. And now he is the Dalai Lama's oracle, the oracle of Tibet. So 2 years later, I was doing a project for Amnesty International up in the northern part of Kenya in the Samburu area, and I was taking pictures of these people, and my guide turned to me and said, you know, their predictor has told them that you were coming to take pictures of them. And I didn't think too much about that because there I was taking pictures of them. But he went on to say, he said, they also said that she said that you would hide from them when you took their picture. And I said, no, I don't hide. I'm right in front. I use very short lenses. I'm usually right in front of the person when I take their portrait. And that night I was home, cleaning my lenses, packing my bag, and I realized, yeah, I had brought my new camera that I'd never used before. It's this panoramic camera. And this is the way I've got to focus that in total darkness. So all of a sudden I thought, well, that's a coincidence. My assistant said, that's amazing. So it was just something we kind of filed away. But I, at that point, decided what I wanted to do is start actually seeking out these people that go into altered states of consciousness in order to heal or predict for their tribes. And that's what I started doing. And so, by the way, here is the woman that was the predictor. And I did take her picture with the panoramic camera. Her name is Sekulin. She's 37 years old, or was at the time. 5 kids. And she had the very same story as the medium of the Dalai Lama. When she was 12 years old, she started having visual hallucinations. She started feeling sick and dizzy. And her grandmother came and said, you know, you've got a talent. And she nurtured her through it. So I literally went around the world and doing my human rights work and started finding these shaman. And the way I would find them, and they never introduced themselves as shaman. You would never know who they were unless you asked the community members, who's the healer here, who goes into trance, and they would tell me and lead me to the person. So this is Namit. She's a Mongolian shaman. I'll just show you some of the 40 I interviewed. This is Morgan Yazi. He's a Navajo medicine man. This is Linta. She's a shaman in Siberia, eastern Siberia. Mingatui, shaman in the Wani tribe in Ecuador, in the Amazon in Ecuador. And one of the last shamans I interviewed was right on the Pakistan-Afghan border. There's a group of animists there called the Kalash. And there's only 3,000 of them left, and they're surrounded by Islam. And they hold on to their animistic beliefs. And they're very interesting looking. They're blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They say they're the remnants of Alexander the Great's army. And they're very fun-loving. They make their own wine. But I went there because I was told that there was a 6-year-old boy that was being initiated to be a shaman, and I wanted to see him. So everybody I had interviewed up to that point had been a shaman. I wanted to be in that process of initiation. So when I got there, I found, no, he wasn't 6 years old. He was a 60-year-old goat herder up in the mountains. So that's the shaman rumor mill. But anyway, I had taken my 16-year-old son with me as an assistant, And we had to hike for about a day and a half to get up to the top of the mountain where John Dooley Khan here was herding his goats. And he was the shaman for the Kalash people. And again, I asked the same question. How did you get into this? What do you do for your tribe? He had the same story of hallucinations, being mentored by an older shaman. And the shaman, in different cultures, induce their trance in different ways. By the way, shamanism is a universal practice. It's the world's oldest spiritual practice. And there's a lot of common denominators. But the way they go into trance can differ. In Mongolia, they beat a drum next to their ear. In South America, they take psychoactive plants like ayahuasca. In Pakistan, they did something that was quite unique. They burn juniper branches. They slaughter an animal, pour the blood over the burning branches, and then the shaman inhales the smoke to go into trance. And so here I'm trying to talk him out of doing the ceremony for me because I don't want him to kill one of his animals. And he said, no, I have to do it. My spirits are telling me I have to do it. You've come so far. So the next morning, his son started the fire, started burning the juniper branches, and he started praying to the mountain spirits, the spirits of the forest. And they slaughtered the animal, and he started inhaling the smoke, and then he went into trance. He stayed into trance for about 5 or 10 minutes. And when he came out, he was very silent. He hardly said anything. And he was very talkative before he went into trance, and I thought, well, this is kind of strange. And I asked one of his sons, through my interpreter, what happened to him? What did he say? Did he see anything? And the son just said, the only thing he said is, your journey is going to be extremely difficult, but you're going to be safe. That's all he said. So the next day, my son and I took off. We left his camp and walked down the mountain and headed up further into the Hindu Kush mountains. And we were out in the middle of nowhere. We had a jeep, and my son started getting sick. And he evidently picked up a bug in the water around John Doolican's camp. And first day went by, couldn't keep anything down. Second day, third day, fourth day, couldn't keep anything down for 4 days. And he was getting so weak he could hardly walk, and I was totally freaked out. We pulled into this little village, and we happened to run into a doctor from Islamabad who was visiting his mother, and he happened to have a bag of glucose and saline and an IV drip and some oral hydration salts that we brought back around. And it was to me, it was like a miracle that whole thing happened. But, so I'll tell you a little bit about the shaman. First of all, this is the common thing with shamanism. It's not always true, but in general. They typically are identified with what they call the call. And the call, the ones I interviewed, almost all of them, it was a psychological crisis.
What chills.
They almost always have a mentor. Somebody that's been through it and come out the other end of this psychological crisis and can show them the ropes and show them and tell them and comfort them along the way. And then they have to face what they call the initiation. And it's almost always this death. A death of their old self and a rebirth of a new self. And this rebirth, I don't know how to explain it. It's like they take on much more of an elevated consciousness. They expand their consciousness. Their awareness of who they are expands. They expand their circle of compassion. I guess that'd be the quickest way to say it. And as such, they learn to go into the spirit world where they believe the spirit world informs our world of reality. So that's where things really happen. So they go there, get the information, come back to help people. And then, after they've learned their trade, they begin their life of service, either a healer, a seer, a priest. And they typically do this for no money. I mean, this is something they just do It's just something added to what they do. And in the beginning, many of them resisted because, like John Dulikan, he's still a goat herder. He still has to do that. But on top of that, he's the healer for the community. Sakulin has 5 kids that she has to take care of. And on top of that, she's the healer of her community. So it is a lot of extra work. So it happened, I put that whole project aside because I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to say about it. I felt I was getting in over my head into the world of consciousness and spirits and all this. But a year and a half ago, I met a young kid who had one of these psychological breaks. I just want to introduce you to him just a moment.
It was just this total shattering, and my mind just opened, and I started thinking of all these different things. And in that sense, it was beautiful. I found it was how I found the first time I'd ever experienced a real connection to the universe, where I really felt like a part of this, that I was this was me. It was just like incredible. And so simple, yeah, just absolutely amazing. And then I kept going, and then I went way too far, and then it got scary. It was just kind of like a panic, I don't know, put some medication in this kid and just hope for the best, but I don't know if it hurt or helped. It was at the point where I was being diagnosed, I think, for side effects of medications. Like, there was a point where I was taking 15 pills.
Oof.
And just, like, I felt like a lab rat. And the side effects were just awful, absolutely awful. Yeah. Felt vomiting all day. I couldn't leave my house for so long from just like these awful anxiety attacks, and like the thought of interacting with people would make me sick to my stomach. It was just so much, and I still don't know. I don't know what was a side effect and what was my mind.
So Adam was on drugs, on pharmaceuticals for about 4 years. And he was out in such a hard time that he decided to go cold turkey, cut him off, and did a Vipassana meditation.
Oh, that sounds so much like my story.
Oh,
I have chills.
Come in various forms, but this one was 10 days, silent meditation, 10 hours a day, very rigorous. I did one just to see what it was about. It was one of the hardest things I did. And but he was able to stabilize himself. And he got a job at Whole Foods Market, which he hadn't been able to do before. And he started having what he called synchronicity, where he'd have a thought and the thing would happen. And by the way, he's very psychic. He has very strong healing potential. But he has no confidence in what's happening. There's no one that's been able to conceptualize it for him. Anyway, he had these, and he decided he needed to go back and do another Vipassana. Well, they learned that he had this history of mental illness, and they sent him home. So the one avenue that he could have gotten relief from cut him off because of the stigma of mental illness. So Adam isn't alone in this, by the way. There's in having bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, any of these heavy psychological episodes. Here's some statistics from the National Institute of Mental Health. 1 in 5 of us will suffer a psychological crisis in our lifetime. And by the way, that's a rising figure right now. The other thing is 1 in 20 will become disabled because of it. And another interesting fact about this phenomena is 50% happens before the age of 14. By the way, most of the shamans, it happens either in their adolescence or in their teenage years. 75% before the age of 24. So it's more or less a phenomenon of young people. So here's the difference in cultures that I noticed. The shaman's advantage. 1, they have a cultural context. The physiological crisis, although it's difficult, it's believed to be, they put it in a positive light. It's something the person's going to come out of and be stronger in the end and have more ability. The other thing that's a big advantage is it's not stigmatized. I mean, if you have the stamp of mental illness on your forehead or on your dossier or whatever, you're not going to get the job. It's not like having diabetes or even cancer. It's one of the most stigmatized things that can happen to the person in our culture. And especially if some kid is having these visions and he's not knowing what's happening to him, and the doctor comes and says, you're broken and you are this, you can imagine how that adds to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing they have an advantage of, they have a mentor. They have somebody that's been through this process that can take and hold their hand and say, listen, I know what this is all about, and this is how you manage it. And the third thing that's a huge advantage is they have a community that buys into what they've gone through. And not only that, they have an outlet for their talents. And many of these people have specific talents that the normal person doesn't have. So that's what is an advantage if you're in one of these indigenous communities. I don't know if you've heard the recent TED Talk by a woman by the name of Eleanor Longden. Has anybody heard that one? It went viral. She did it a couple of months ago. This is a young woman. When she went to college, she started hearing voices. And she said, my nightmare began when I told my roommate I was hearing voices.
Mm.
Roommate said, you better see a doctor. So she went and saw the doctor. The doctor said, you better see a psychiatrist.
Give you a bunch of pills.
The psychiatrist gave her the label, schizophrenia, put her on medications. By the way, these medications suppress the symptoms. They don't get at the root problem. And she said, from that point on, she just spiraled down.
Mm.
You ought to listen to her video on how she brought herself out of that.
Mm.
She eventually got to the point where she said, I realized those voices were helping me resolve this old childhood trauma of sexual molestation. But it took her and a couple of friends that believed in her to get her out of that hole that she had gone down because of that stigma. So, if you do have one of these issues, one of us does have one of these issues, we go to somebody. The common method of treatment is to suppress the symptoms of trauma. So with Adam, we've been following him on, and so I've been posting this on our blog over the last year and a half, how he's doing and what's going on. By the way, he's homeless now, like so many end up. And we've started interviewing professionals that take a whole different approach to this problem. And in fact, some of the psychiatrists, psychologists we've interviewed, and we're posting them as well, claim are like to label many of these instances, not all of them, but many of them, as spiritual emergencies. And they believe, just like I do now, if you hold these people, you don't stigmatize them, you don't scare them with a label and tell them they're broken. And if you give them a place of support, that the psyche itself is self-healing, it will take them and it will eventually work out whatever is going on with them, and they'll typically come out at a higher level of awareness and consciousness.
Now that we saw that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about my experience. I feel like I definitely experienced exactly what he was talking about when I was about 14 to 19. And like he said, it happens usually in adolescence or the teenage years for a lot of these people in indigenous cultures. And that's exactly what happened to me. Was I was really like feeling all of these emotions and couldn't process what was actually happening, this depression, this sadness, this like feeling of doom, feeling of like nothing will ever get better, and just like then everything around me falling apart, and then being like sent over to psychiatrists or therapists or like doctors because they wanted to give me a bunch of medicine, and then I had to take a bunch of medicine. That's why I ended up on Ambien and Xanax throughout my high school years. And from there, that became a coping mechanism. A lot of this is in my book, so if you want to know more about it, check the book out. But using these things as coping mechanisms And in that moment when I had that spiritual experience where that man was talking in front of the classroom about energy and vibration and healing, and then in that moment I stopped taking every single pill, and I was like, this I need to figure out, I need to understand. And that was exactly where my rebirth happened, where the whole like trajectory of my whole life changed. And never once again did I ever touch a pill. Never once again did I feel like I needed it, because I understood the mind is mine. I'm allowed to be in the driver's seat. I can figure this out on my own. I don't need doctors to tell me what to do. I don't need a bunch of medicines. I'm not saying medicines are bad or that you should not be taking them. Talk to your doctor. But from my experience when I was 14 to 19, that, like he said, it was over the top of the symptoms, over the root of what was actually going on, and then over the top of that, probably having a bunch of other symptoms because of it. Yes, so I completely can understand where he's coming from, of this moment of breakdown that is really, it is the death. It is the death of the original person, so that they can rebirth into this brand new awareness. It's almost like going to the underworld and then coming back up out of it and becoming this whole new version of self. And along that journey, like, that was where I was like going on my spiritual path and like trying to figure out what exactly is going on. What exactly does this mean? What exactly is this energy healing? What exactly is the law of attraction? What exactly is all of these things? And it led me on so many different paths, and it's like, it is like this huge adventure that I went on that you guys are going to get to read about in my book. But it is like in my book I talk about Plato's Allegory of the cave, where this man is sitting against a wall. So him and a bunch of other people are sitting chained there, and their reality is they only see the cave wall, and they see the projections of the things behind them because there's a fire. So there's a fire and there's people's shadows on the cave wall. So their reality is, okay, the cave wall is all there is to reality. That is all. And this one man, he becomes unchained and he moves his way out of the cave to figure out that there is actual reality, and those projections are not the reality. It is the product of reality. It's just the shadows because of the fire. And so he becomes blind because he's out in the light and his eyes are not used to the light. And so when he comes back, he's blind, but he tells these people, you have to come out here because there's actual people out there. Like, there's a real reality that you're not understanding. And these people think he's nuts. They think he's crazy because he's blind now. Like, why would they go out and risk their eyesight? Why would they listen to somebody? Because this is all they know. This is their perception of reality, and they're not willing to give up this idea of what is reality. And is that wrong for them to want to stay in the cave for safety, for comfort? Or would it be much more beneficial to actually take the chains off and go out into the world to understand for yourself, to experience for yourself, to go on your own journey into discovery, into exploration, into understanding the truth about reality, the truth about what is on the other side of physical reality? And keeping this mind open to say, maybe I should go down all these different avenues. I should talk to all kinds of different people. Like this man went on his own journey to talk to, he said 40 shamans, to talk to people who had a different perspective, people who were outside of the cave that he was already born into in his personal reality, and actually being open enough to have an open mind to say, okay, doesn't mean I have to believe it or not, but I will still go out on the journey to discover for myself. And that, I think, is so brave when someone is willing to drop their maybe religious ideologies, drop whatever they were born into, and say, hold on a second, I'll figure it out for myself. Knowledge, seeking knowledge eternally, trying to understand more or even deeper levels. And even after 6 years, I'm still learning brand new things. I'm still discovering brand new ways of thinking. Like just now I'm being trained as a family constellation practitioner, and that is a whole new way of understanding like so much about life and so much about the patternings that we have and the connection to our ancestors that we have. And so if I did not ever go on that path, and if I was not open-minded to a brand new perspective, I wouldn't have ever come across these teachings. I wouldn't have ever understood anything about these teachings. So I guess if you were maybe going through something like that, really honing in on, like I said, this was my experience of getting out of my own cave. Really going on an in-depth search for meaning, for understanding of reality, for understanding of the power that you have over your mind, over the power that you have to create your reality, or the power that you have to meditate and to really hone in on the energy of your own mind and your body, and like really being able to understand your sensitivities to the world around you. Because I think when I was much younger, I was very sensitive and did not have the language or the understanding to understand, okay, there is much more that I'm aware of than what I have been taught that I could be aware of. Because I think a lot of this anxiety was just being open to so much information and not being able to really hone in on my own energy, my own way of being, my own place in the world. And going through psychic training or going through meditative practices and really understanding how to self-regulate, how to self-calm, and really like take into account, maybe I'm picking up on what somebody else is feeling right now, or maybe like I'm picking up on some other thing out in the ethers. Like really being able to hone in on these sensitivities in my psychic classes was so beneficial, and being able to like go out and research and understand there is such thing as psychic awareness. There is such a thing. There are studies. There are scientists who have tried to understand the non-physical, and if they have tried to understand it, there should be some kind of validation or some kind of awareness. And actually looking into things like lucid dreaming, like these things, it really helps you to understand like there is so much more to this reality than we have been able to understand so far. And this is like with a lot of the people who were pioneers in the scientific field of like, what is that called, of like understanding physics or understanding what is energy, and how do things move, and how do we create light bulbs with this energy, how do we, like all of these really, it is pretty much, it seems almost esoteric to really have an idea of physics, of this thing we cannot see with our eyes. And I think it's so interesting and so cool. So if you're interested in these kind of topics, definitely go on your own journey. Go walk out of your own cave and understand that there is much more to this life than maybe you have come to understand so far. I think that'll be it for today. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down below in the comment section. Or if you have something you would like for me to react to next, you can send it to my email at vibrate2create@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram at vibrate2create. And if you want more information about my book, you can visit my website at www.vibrate2create.com. I hope you guys are enjoying these reaction videos. I hope maybe it's uncovering some new layers of depth and understanding of reality for you. And yeah, all the links to these videos are always in the description box below. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you for joining me. Bye guys.